Hey everybody, welcome back to another live stream from Northeast Christian Apologetics. My name is Simon Williams, and today we are doing our Monday evening book study. So this, just as a reminder about what this is basically just kind of like a reaction channel, but or reaction videos, but we're reacting to and discussing books instead of videos and movies and things like that. But Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that 2023 was a good year for you, and that you are eager to get started in 2024. I was not able to stay up till midnight last night. I've never been good about that, but last night I was having an early night. So I did not stay up till midnight, but nevertheless, I am excited about jumping into 2024, even though it's an election year this year. I hope that you guys are ready to experience all the happiness that's going to be going on this year. Oh, man. But anyway, just like for the past few weeks, we didn't meet last week, and I hope that you guys enjoyed your Christmas, and that you had a great time with family and friends and ate really good food and opened presents and got to see joyous faces on children like I did. But the last 2 weeks have gone by really fast for me, so it doesn't really seem like we've been apart for very long at all. Also, by the way, as you can see, I have a new addition. Let me know if there's any popping, or way back in the beginning, when we were doing On Guard, I was using a different mic that had some noise issues, and I swapped over to my other mic, which seemed to be doing well, but my wife got me this one for Christmas, and so I'm trying this one out. However, still using the same cords as the last time, so I don't know if it was the mic or the cords. So let me know if you hear any static or audible audio issues. All right, and I'll try to get it fixed. But we are discussing the book Tactics, like we have been for the past few weeks. This is a book by Greg Koukl, and he operates a ministry called Stand to Reason. It's a very good ministry. I recommend checking him out. And as usual, we talk about where to get the book. You can find this book on Amazon.com or ChristianBooks.com. Definitely recommend getting the book yourself so that you're able to follow along in the reading, and also to be able to reference this material yourself. I find that these books are very helpful to have on hand. So I am very grateful to have these books, and I think that you will as well. And also it gives you an opportunity to read the books without listening to me providing my input, if that is something that you don't want to hear. One other thing, don't forget to subscribe. Your subscription helps get this information out to more people. Tactics is an incredibly helpful book. I want to be able to help get Christians access to this kind of material, and even non-Christians, but my main audience and focus are Christians. So I want as many people who can and have a desire to get to this information to be able to get it conveniently. All right. So, and you can help me in that endeavor by subscribing and sharing the content on your social media groups with your family and friends, things like that. You also saw in the reel, in the opening, talking about I have a slideshow up that's talking about different churches that we are doing Apologetics 101 at here in Connecticut, and it would be helpful if you have a church in Connecticut that you would like apologetics to be taught at. Hit me up, introduce me to your pastor, or an elder or a leader an associate pastor or things like that, and I will see what we can do to collaborate on getting apologetics introduced to your church. Right now, we're providing Apologetics 101 at the church in New London, Connecticut, as well as Castle Church in Norwich, Connecticut. So very grateful for those churches to allow me to provide this apologetics content for them. Definitely helps strengthen the faith of a lot of people, and also gives you just another tool in your tool belt for providing an answer to anyone who asks for the reason for the hope that is in you. All right, so without further delay, let's go ahead and jump into the reading. As I said before, we're on chapter 5, and we've been talking about the Columbo Tactic. Last week, we were introduced to the Columbo Tactic and how to get into the driver's seat and direct conversations. The Columbo Tactic is really about asking questions. It's getting information. But that's not the only aspect of the Columbo Tactic. You can also use it to reverse the burden of proof. Just as a reminder, these tactics are often utilized by non-Christians, especially atheists. They have a very easy time using these tactics because they think that they have a tendency to think that questions are arguments, and they often use questions to not only direct the conversation but also to shut down like believers. Now, when you are a believer, you have a position, and it's a position that they're probably familiar with, and they will ask questions in order to disrupt your beliefs, to guide the conversation the way they want it to go. So, but we can also use questions. Christians have a tendency to want to only answer questions, but it's really important to what Greg Koukl is going to be saying is that we're not the only ones who have to defend a position. Everyone, this is incredibly important that we're going to be talking about right off in the first page here, but everyone has a worldview, but most people don't really understand their own worldview. So what we need to do is use questions in order to better understand the worldview of the person that we're talking with. And a lot of times they don't know what their worldview is. So don't be surprised if they're not able to answer questions. All right, but still use them. Well, anyway, so Greg starts this chapter by saying, some people think Christians are the only ones who need to answer for their views. Of course, we should be able to give reasons for what we think is true, but we are not the only ones. Others need to give an accounting too. It's not unusual, though, for people to forget that they have this responsibility. At times, they seem to think that all they have to do is tell a really good story, and they've done their job. You might call this maneuver bedtime story. A critic conjures up a tale meant to put your view or your argument to rest. It's a way of explaining away your point of view with an opinion, but with no substantiating evidence. Bedtime storytellers often start with the phrase, "Oh, I can explain that," and then spin their yarn. But this will not do. They might as well have started with "Once upon a time." There is a difference between an opinion and an argument. An opinion is just a point of view. An argument, by contrast, is a point of view supported by reasons. More on this in a moment. Skeptics often give the first, but not the second. When you understand this distinction, your job as an ambassador will be much easier. If you've watched any reruns of I Love Lucy, or if you're old enough like me to remember the first runs, you might recall Ricky Ricardo saying, "Lucy, you've got a lot of splaining to do." Ricky's statement applies here too. People on the other side of your opinion have a lot of splaining to do themselves, and it's your job to get them to do it. Many challenges to Christianity thrive on vague generalities and forceful but vacuous slogans. How do we help others be more explicit about the reasons for their view? How do we keep them intellectually honest? The second step of the Columbo is the answer. It's the second part of our game plan. I call it reversing the burden of proof. The burden of proof is the responsibility someone in the conversation has to give evidence for a view. Who has that responsibility? The person who makes the claim bears that responsibility. If you say something is so, specifically if it's controversial, then you have a responsibility to tell why you think it's so. The natural impulse for more aggressive Christians is to take up a challenge and attempt to prove the other person wrong. Don't do it. If you try, you're just giving him a free ride. So one thing I'm going to mention here is that, yes, as soon as you make a claim, then you are in a position in which you have taken on the burden of proof. The need to provide evidence for why you believe that your claim is true. But it's not always the case that only people who make claims are people that need to shoulder the burden of proof. If you are, even if you harbor doubts, you may, harboring those doubts can require justification, can require an asking of evidence, such as if somebody harbors doubts about the world being round, or the moon orbiting the earth, or the state of Connecticut residing in the United States of America, things like that. If you harbor doubts about that, then personally, I'm going to be asking why. And whenever you ask a question, why do you harbor doubts, or why do you doubt that the moon orbits the earth, then that is a request for justification. That's a request for evidence. That's a request for reasons. That's a request for arguments. Okay? So it's not only that claims, even doubts can lead to requests for justification. So it's not your job to refute every story a skeptic can spin or every claim he can manufacture. If he makes a claim, then it's his responsibility to give reasons why anyone should take his claim seriously. Don't allow yourself to be thrust into a defensive position if you're not advancing a view. Place the burden of proof where it belongs, on the one who is making the claim. No more free rides. That's your rule from now on. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Cosmic confusion. Once, I was a guest at a top-rated secular radio station in Los Angeles. The topic was intelligent design versus evolution. When a caller invoked the Big Bang to argue against the creator, I pointed out that the Big Bang actually works in my favor. Then I used a Big Bang needs a Big Banger line. This always gets a laugh, but it's also a clever way to make a common-sense point. All effects need causes adequate to explain them. The caller disagreed. The Big Bang doesn't need God, he asserted. You can start with a base of nothing, he began, and you could say that there was nothing but an infinite continuous moment until one tiny little insignificant thing happened. A point happened in the nothingness. Now I know what you're thinking. How do you start with nothing and then end up with something? How do you get a point in the nothingness? Hardly a tiny little insignificant thing. If your bank account has no balance, there's no sense in checking the statement every month to see if you've earned interest. The thought apparently did not occur to the caller, however. Facts, as C.S. Lewis once noted, can be inconvenient things. This requires no intelligence, he continued, so no intelligent God had to intervene. All we need is a tiny imperfection in the perfect nothingness, and that expanded and it became increasingly complex, and soon you have galaxies and planets. You're right about one thing, I responded. When you start with, you could say that, you can spin any yarn you want, but then comes a hard point, giving reasons why anyone should take your science fiction story seriously. It's not my job to disprove you're something from nothing fairy tale. It's your job to prove it. You haven't done that. You haven't even tried. I refused to let him tell a ridiculous tale and then toss the burden of proof back into my lap. I did not give him a free ride. You might have heard the phrase "throw down the gauntlet" and wondered what it means. A gauntlet was an armored glove worn by medieval knights. When a knight threw his gauntlet into the arena, it was a challenge to another knight to take up the gauntlet and square off for a fight. The caller on this radio show had thrown down his gauntlet and then expected to walk off with the prize without a struggle. This happens all the time. But I wasn't going to let him off that easily, and neither should you. For too long, we have let others contrive fanciful challenges and then sit back and watch us squirm. Those days are over. Again, no more free rides. If they tell you the story, let them defend it. They need to offer an argument, not merely tell us a tale. These stories often have great rhetorical power. They have the ability to psychologically unsettle you and undermine your confidence in your point of view. But every story has to be put to the test. Critics need to have more than a good imagination. They need reasons. That's the way arguments work. So, a house without walls. An argument is a specific kind of thing. Think of an argument like a simple house, a roof supported by walls. The roof is the conclusion, and the walls are the supporting ideas. But by testing the walls, we can see whether they are strong enough to keep the roof from tumbling down. If the walls are solid, the conclusion, the roof, rests securely on its supporting structure. If the walls collapse, the roof goes flat and the argument is defeated. Some arguments are not really arguments at all. Many people try to build their roof right on the ground instead of erecting solid walls, the supporting ideas that hold the conclusion up. They simply make assertions and then pound the podium or verbally pound you. An argument is different from an assertion, though, as I mentioned earlier. An assertion simply states a point. An argument adds supporting reasons why anyone should take the point seriously. The reasons then become the topic of mutual discussion or analysis. But if there are no reasons, there's little to discuss. Opinions by themselves are not proof. Intelligent belief requires justification. Roofs are useless when they are on the ground. No one can live in a house without walls. In the same way, an assertion without evidence is not very useful. So, this was when the caller came in and started talking about the Big Bang. What Koukl did was go into, he started gearing towards the Kalam cosmological argument, which we discussed when we were reading through On Guard. But that's why he asks a question regarding, like, you need to have what kind of thing caused the Big Bang. The Big Bang is an effect. The caller was simply saying, making assertions about the Big Bang. Like, this is an effect that needs no cause. But why is that? Can you give me a single example of an effect occurring where there is no cause? And so that's what he's getting at here. We're talking about generally accepted principles of causation. That is also part of an argument for the existence of God, namely the Kalam cosmological argument that uses Big Bang cosmology as evidence to support the second premise of the argument. So the Big Bang cosmology is used to support the premise that the universe began to exist. All right. So don't let someone flatten you when dropping a roof on your head. Make him build walls underneath his roof. Ask him for reasons or facts to support his conclusions. I frequently get calls on my radio show / podcast from people who think they are giving me an argument when all they are doing is forcefully stating a view. This move may sound compelling at first, and their story may even seem plausible, but there is a difference between giving an explanation and giving evidence why the explanation is a good one. Your job is to recognize when the roof is lying flat on the ground and simply point it out. But how? All right, so the second Columbo question. How do you reverse the burden of proof when the other person is making the claim? You do it Columbo style with a question. Here it is. How do you come to that conclusion? This question effectively shifts the burden of proof onto the challenger, where it belongs. This is a gentler variation of where do you get your facts, though it's similar in content. It has a kinder, more genial tone, since it charitably assumes a critic has not just told a story or made an unsubstantiated claim, but has done some thinking. Remember, this is a model question. You can also ask, why do you say that? Or what are your reasons for holding that view? Or what makes you think it happened that way? Or I'm curious, why does the idea seem compelling to you? Questions like these give a person a chance to express his rationale, if he has any. They will also give you more material and time to work with in addressing his concerns. The first Columbo question helps you know what a person thinks. The second question helps you know why he thinks the way he does. It charitably assumes he has actually come to a conclusion that he has reasons for his view and not merely strong feelings about it. By the way, don't be surprised if you get dead air again when you ask someone for reasons. Most critics are eager to attack your faith, but are not prepared to defend their own. They have never thought much about their views, so they can't offer you intelligible reasons for believing them, as surprising as that sounds. So be prepared for blank stares, just like with your first Columbo question. Okay? So, caught off guard, some will admit they don't have any reasons for their view, which is a remarkable confession. This frank admission always prompts another question from me. Why would you believe something you have no reason to think is true? Notice that this is just a variation of our second Columbo tactic. See how simple that is? The question, how do you come to that conclusion, accomplishes something vital. It forces the person you're in conversation with to give an account of their beliefs. Christians should not be the only ones who have to defend their views. So reject the impulse to counter every assertion someone manufactures or to refute every tale spun out of thin air. Instead, steer the conversation to put the burden of proof back on the other person. Make him give reasons, not just his point of view. It's not your job to defeat his claims. It's his job to defend it. All right, so this is very important in these conversations. Remember that the first stage of the Columbo tactic is just to get information, okay, about what the person believes. All right, what do you mean by that? And then this one is getting supporting reasons. All right, supporting reasons are very important. So beliefs are important, understanding the beliefs, and then understanding the reasons why somebody has those beliefs. Okay. The step in the Columbo tactic trades on a very important notion. An alternate explanation is not a refutation. Very important. Very important. So if you are provided with an alternative explanation, that doesn't mean that your explanation is automatically invalid. Okay? It could easily be the case that there is an alternative explanation. And it doesn't always need to be the case that an alternative explanation is a refutation of the gospel or the truth of Christianity and things like that. Okay, so we believers, and everyone is a believer in something. We have a tendency to be very dogmatic about what we believe, and what we need to do is to understand what we believe, and then have the wisdom to understand that we are limited and finite in our knowledge, okay? And so we can always learn. So be prepared to, and I hope that you guys have been trying to use these questions in your daily life when they pop up, like what do you mean by that, and gaining information and stuff like that. And don't ever stop learning as well. You know, keep studying the Bible, keep studying the church history, Christian philosophy, things like that. Get a robust understanding of what it is you believe. And then, and that will help sometimes, if you do it right, it will, when you get over the hump of knowledge, it has a tendency to humble you, recognizing how much it is that you don't know. And so you're less... You can become less dogmatic, although I've seen a lot of people become way more dogmatic after they've done some learning. But just keep in mind that you want to remain humble. Okay? So, and if somebody provides an alternative explanation, don't instantly go on the defensive about it. You know, ask for reasons. Why is it that you believe this alternative explanation? Okay? Why do you prefer your alternative explanation over my explanation? Okay, that's a perfectly valid question. All right, where were we at? An alternative explanation is not a refutation. Here's what I mean. It is not uncommon for someone to trot out their "I can explain that" opener, then conjure up a story that supports their view. You can see right away, though, that giving an explanation is not the same as giving an argument or refuting someone else's argument. She has to do more. She has to give some kind of accounting of why she thinks her story is sound. Oxford biologist Richard Dawkins wrote a landmark work called The Blind Watchmaker. Notice the way he explains how flight might have evolved. How did wings get their start? Many animals leap from bough to bough and sometimes fall to the ground, especially in a small animal. The whole body surface catches the air and assists the leap, or breaks the fall, by acting as a crude aerofoil. Any tendency to increase the ratio of surface area to weight would help. For example, flaps of skin growing out of the angles of joints. From here, there is a continuous series of gradations to gliding wings and hence to flapping wings. Of course, explanations like this abound in textbooks on evolution and may sound like good ones to a Darwinist. These kinds of fanciful tales are meant to parry objections, and this particular one has a good track record. This is partly because it sounds plausible enough at first. If it didn't, it wouldn't be appealing. And partly because it shields a Darwinian paradigm from a certain kind of criticism. Don't misunderstand me. Starting with a hypothetical explanation is not in itself the difficulty. Science, forensics, and normal day-to-day problem solving trade on this ability all the time. Imagining what might have taken place may be a legitimate first step, but is not the last one, though, because a story doesn't settle anything. More is required. In the case of flight, Dawkins's breezy account obscures two obstacles. First is the need for a massive infusion of new genetic information at just the right time and in just the right balance to accomplish the prodigious structural changes physically needed for flight. Second is the instinctual, sensory, psychomotor alterations required for the kind of flight that evolution could take advantage of. To overcome these serious hurdles, Dawkins needs to show the detailed and precise evolutionary pathways in specific cases of flight. Birds, for example. This he does not do. Explanations like Dawkins's are common in Darwinian circles. They are known derisively by critics as just-so stories, after Rudyard Kipling's book of that title, a children's book with chapters like How the Leopard Got His Spots and How the Camel Got His Hump. But stories like these pop up outside of Darwinism too. Make sure you are not lulled to sleep by them. There are three questions you should always ask whenever someone offers an alternative explanation. Is it possible? Is it plausible? Is it probable? First, is it possible? Some options seem unworkable on closer examination. In Chapter 4, I questioned the view that the teaching of reincarnation was secretly removed from the Bible sometime during the 4th century. Such editing would require deleting selected lines of text from tens of thousands of handwritten New Testament documents that had been circulating around the Roman Empire for more than 300 years. This could not happen. It's simply not possible. The point is that nothingness... the point in the nothingness assertion about the causeless Big Bang I mentioned earlier in this chapter fails for the same reason. As one wit put it, from nothing, nothing comes. Second, ex nihilo nihil fit. From nothing, nothing comes. It's a well-known metaphysical principle. So second, it is plausible, or is it plausible? Is it reasonable to think something like this might have taken place given the evidence? Many things are possible that are not plausible. It is possible that I would have a liver for dinner tonight. Nothing in principle prevents that from happening. It is not plausible, however. The reason is simple. I hate liver. Therefore, no one would ever be justified in thinking liver would be on my dinner plate at supper time. So whenever you hear, well, I can explain that, look closely to see whether there is any evidence that the alternative offered describes what actually took place. It may be theoretically possible, but is it plausible? Does any reliable evidence point to that alternative? Third, is it probable? Is it the best explanation considering the competing options? The person you're talking with must be able to show why his view is more likely than the one you are offering. For this, he needs reasons. Why is his explanation a better one than yours? So this often comes up when you're talking about like the resurrection, and talking about historical evidences for the resurrection and things of that nature, a lot of people are going to talk about or provide an alternative explanation for the rise of Christianity and the belief in the resurrection, and they're going to try to use naturalistic explanations. And a lot of the times when you ask why should we prefer that one, why do you think it's more plausible? They'll say it's more plausible because I don't need to posit a supernatural being. I don't need to rest on this event being a miracle. And so then you have to ask more questions like what makes that preferable? Why are you assuming naturalism? Why should we believe that naturalism is true, and things of that nature? Okay, so don't be afraid to start asking questions. Naturalism has a lot of problems with it, and if you ever have any questions about those problems, I have a couple YouTube videos that go into them, go into just some of the problems. Those aren't even all the problems with naturalism. But yeah. So all right. So why is this explanation better than the one year? Here's the basic critical thinking principle. When it comes to weighty matters, go with the odds-on favorite, not the long shot, especially when so much is riding on the decision. It may seem plausible to some that monkeys banging on typewriters long enough could eventually pound out the works of Shakespeare, but that doesn't mean we're justified in thinking a baboon wrote Hamlet. I'm still convinced Shakespeare did that. This is why your second Columbo question, how did you come to that conclusion, is so powerful. It helps you handle outlandish speculations and bizarre alternative explanations by placing the burden of proof where it belongs, on the shoulders of the one making the claim. Reversing the burden of proof is not a trick to avoid defending our ideas. When we give opinions, we have to answer for them, just like anyone else. We have a responsibility, but so do they. That's my point. If you find yourself stymied in a discussion, you may be looking for an argument that isn't there. It may be a bedtime story or unsubstantiated assertion. Simply ask yourself, did he give me an argument or did he just give me an opinion? If the latter, then say, well, that's an interesting point of view, but what's your argument? How did you come to that conclusion? Why should I take your point seriously? Please take a moment and give me some of your reasons. When he answers you, be alert to the differences between what is possible, what is plausible, and what is probable, given his evidence. Okay. There are only a few exceptions to the burden of proof rule, and they are usually obvious. We are not obligated to prove our own existence. To defend self-evident truths, circles are not squares, or to justify a basic reliability of our senses. The way things appear to be are probably the way they actually are, unless we have good reason to believe otherwise. This principle keeps us alive every day. It doesn't need defending. You will come across people who do think that you need to justify your sense experience and things of that nature, even though these same people who are questioning your sense experience constantly use it for their own survival. All right, so these things that your experiences are things that you kind of have to take for granted. And even when you start questioning one experience, it's usually because you had another experience contradict it. Okay, so even though our sense experience is not infallible, but we cannot interact with the world via any other way except experiences. We are completely dependent on experiences. Okay, so it becomes the act of a wise person, and through experience that you come to understand which experiences you can believe and which experiences you need to double check on. You know, that's the whole point of a double take. You know, if you see something and you're not sure what you saw, and you look again real quick, you're doing a double take. You're verifying that what you have seen is actually true. And these kind of things happen all the time when we're involved in conversation of these kinds of natures. So, all right. So The second step of our game plan is not an evasive ploy on our part. Rather, it's a legitimate way to ward off extreme or unfounded confidence in an unreasonable view, or extreme and unfounded doubt of a reasonable option. An atheist once asked me if it was possible I could be mistaken about my beliefs. Possible? Of course it's possible, I admitted. I'm not omniscient. Plus, I've actually been wrong a few times in my life. I point out, though, that this knife cuts both ways. If my admission weakens my case, it weakens his case too, since atheists aren't omniscient either. I don't think it weakens anybody's case, though, which is why I'd never use this line against an atheist. I'm not threatened by the challenge, and I don't threaten others with it, since it accomplishes nothing for either side. Just because it's possible to be mistaken about something that seems obvious, that does not mean it's reasonable to think we are. This is the skeptic's error. Do not be taken in by it. Ask, how do you come to that conclusion, or some variation often. If there is any ambiguity in any answer, ask more questions. Have them spell things out. The question is a fair one. It's engaging and conversational. It's probing, but still amicable. And it keeps you in the driver's seat while the other person does the work he is responsible for. Remember, you do not have to swing for the fences. You don't even have to get on base, in my opinion. You just need to get into the batter's box, and your first 2 Columbo questions get you there. Ask them often, then watch and see what the Holy Spirit does. So what we learned in this chapter. First, we learned the second step of our game plan, the second use of the Columbo Tactic. It's based on the fair expectation that people offer good reasons for the important things that they think are true. Instead of giving our critics a free ride by letting them make assertions that they expect us to refute, we make them defend their own beliefs or unbelief, as the case may be. I call this move reversing the burden of proof. In any dispute, the person who advances an opinion, claim, or point of view has the job of defending it. It's not your duty to prove him wrong. It's his duty to prove himself right. Our second Columbo question, how do you come to that conclusion, or some variation, does the job. The question is powerful for 2 reasons. It ensures that you understand the reasons for the other person's view, if there are any, and it gets the other person thinking about the legitimacy of his view. Second, we learned how a basic argument is structured. Opinions are not proof. A person giving a real argument does more than just state a belief. She supports her belief with evidence and reasons, much like the walls of a house support its roof. Roofs are useless when they're on the ground. Opinions are harmless when they lack justification. When someone says to you, the Bible's been changed so many times, or you don't need God to have objective morality, or there's an infinite number of universes and ours just happens to be the one that looks designed, don't retreat in silence. Instead, just raise your eyebrow and say, oh, how do you come to that conclusion? It's not enough for someone to contradict your view by simply telling a story. An alternate explanation is not a refutation. The new option must be not only possible or even plausible, but also more likely, all things considered, than the idea you are offering. All right. So we've made it to the end of the chapter. Woo! And you know what that means? That means that we get to celebrate. Yeah! We celebrated. Celebrated. Woo-hoo! All right. All right, good job getting to the end of the chapter with me, guys. I hope that you got something out of it. I think that this chapter is very helpful. The asking questions is incredibly important to get to know the person that you're talking to. Okay, we should be in. Oops, yep. Don't forget to subscribe. I always forget to turn that thing off after I turn it on. So. Thanks for coming out with me tonight, guys. Really appreciate it. Remember, the Columbo Tactic is very, very helpful. Remember to ask questions like, what do you mean by that? Or, and also this new question, like, why do you believe that way? Or what makes you think that way? Or what reasons do you have to support that belief? Or what's your justification? Things of that nature, or just simply asking why. What do you mean by that? They elaborate on what they're saying, what they believe, and then you just say why. So why do you believe that? What reasons do you have to believe that God doesn't exist, for example? Or what reasons do you have to believe that naturalism is true? Why don't you think that, what do you mean by Trinity? Like if someone doesn't believe that God is a Trinity, you can just be like, what do you mean by that? What is it that you believe? If you don't think that God's a Trinity, then what do you think that he is? What reasons do you have for believing that God is just a monistic deity, or a unit? Why do you hold to Unitarianism, or believing that hell is not eternal conscious torment, that people suffer finitely and get annihilated, and or they experience no such suffering and just get annihilated immediately? So what reasons do you have to believe that people get annihilated after they die? What reasons do you have to doubt the existence of eternal of a place of eternal conscious suffering? There's this goes on forever. You can ask these kinds of questions very easily, and you can learn things as well as get a better understanding of the person you're talking with. This is very important. It's very important to understand who you're talking to and why they believe what they believe. Okay, you want to make sure that you understand their point of view as well as you can, and then to ask questions. These kinds of conversations can happen regularly. At your next Bible study, if somebody is asking questions about Job, I don't think that it was fair of God to allow Satan to caused Job to suffer like this. It's like, so what do you mean by the suffering? What kind of suffering are you saying that God doesn't have justification for allowing? Why do you think that God, an omniscient, perfectly good being, why would you think that he wouldn't have sufficient moral justification for doing any action? If he's actually omniscient and perfectly good, then what justification do you have for doubting that he would have justification for anything that he does? That kind of stuff. But I really appreciate you guys coming out and being with me. Don't ever hesitate to put a comment in the chat, or offer your opinions on things. I look forward to seeing them and to discuss them, and your guys' input helps me to keep focus on it carries me, really. I like seeing you guys' comments, and as long as they're nice. But anyway, same time next week, Monday at 6 p.m. We're going to be doing chapter 6 of chapter 6 of Tactics. Chapter 6 is 2 reliable rescues. He's going to be Koukl's going to be teaching us how to get out of trouble if we get into trouble. All right, so all right, have a great week, guys. Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. All right, and also look in the live streams, upcoming live streams of the YouTube channel. And if you subscribe and turn on notifications, you'll get notified when this book study's happening. All right, God bless everyone. Have a great night. Hey, before you go, I hope you enjoyed today's enlightening discussion during our Christian Apologetics book study. It's always a blessing to come together to explore our faith and grow in our understanding. Your participation means the world to me, and I'm grateful for your continued support of Northeast Christian Apologetics. Remember, you can stay connected with me and access valuable resources by visiting my website at nechristianapologetics.com. There you'll find a wealth of articles, videos, and recommended reading material to deepen your knowledge of Christian apologetics. If you're as passionate as I am about equipping believers to defend their faith and engage in meaningful conversations, you can also support this ministry in various ways. One way to support this work is through patreon.com. By becoming a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content, early access to our discussions, and a chance to connect with like-minded individuals who share your passion for Christian apologetics. If Patreon is not your style, some people prefer to give me a one-time tip. And if you'd like to do that, then feel free to do so through Venmo or Cash App. But of course, there are many ways to support me. By praying for this ministry, sharing the content on social media, or simply spreading the word about what I do. Every bit of support goes a long way in helping me fulfill my mission. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Your presence and engagement enrich these discussions, and together, we're on a journey to strengthen our faith and share the good news with others. Stay tuned for more exciting book studies, thought-provoking discussions, and opportunities to grow your Christian apologetics journey. I look forward to seeing you again.